getting excited. There's Mr. Mandela, Mr. Nelson Mandela, a free man taking his first steps into a new South Africa. Mrs. Winnie Mandela next to him, waving to the crowds. Hand in hand, they leave the Victor Verster prison. Officials, marshals of the National Reception Committee trying to get the people, and a salute from Mr. Nelson Mandela, his wife Winnie, greeting the people outside the fences of the Victor Verster prison. That is the man who the world has been waiting to see. People running alongside the car, pushing, touching the car.
Welcome to the Michael Brooks Show. We're broadcasting live from Brooklyn, USA, where left is best, as it is everywhere else, with super producer Matt Leck.
Hello.
Chief economist David Griscom.
How's it going?
Super producer David Slavic, roaming the digitosphere in the ever-aggressive, ever-expanding, ever-leftward TMBS universe. On this week's special show, special Friday show, because we're off next week, we are explaining why land expropriation in South Africa is good. It's also actually pretty much good everywhere else, along with many, many, many other forms of expropriation from the oligarchy. We're going to talk about that, plus why the hashtag white genocide, white nationalist conspiracy theory connects Rhodesia-obsessed terrorist Dylan Roof with Tucker Carlson and Donald Trump and the real policy stakes for the peaceful transfer of land to those it was stolen from in a social democratic fashion in South Africa. We got a shout out to get to. We've got a list of resistance people you got to watch out for. And of course, the resistance props too. Kofifi Annan.
Don't retweet the Krasensteins.
Don't retweet the Krasensteins. Retweet this if you agree. He is not a real president. You say fake news, I say fake president. Plus, much more, including a new proposal that the CIA get back into the cultural propaganda business. Mehdi Hassan gets Steven Pinker in a not only a logic, but actually a historical context and empathy chokehold. We'll explain that and play that clip. Plus, we have your Discord questions and your phone calls. This is a special full episode with a post-game wrapped right inside it for everybody. Welcome to our new YouTube channel. Welcome patrons and everyone else. Let's get to it. The meme about South Africa and land expropriation has been seized by the worst people on the planet, white nationalists across the globe, those who not only want to make up lies, conspiracy theories, and feed racial paranoia and conspiracy theories today, but they also want to undermine the moral and political legacy of one of the greatest accomplishments of the latter part of the 20th century, the destruction of the apartheid system, and the heroic, distinct leadership of the African National Congress, which is, of course, not perfect, has had many problems in power. Most of those problems in power having to do with not confronting capitalism and oligarchy nearly enough. But they did liberate South Africa from one of the most morally obscene systems known to humankind. These people not only are making up lies about the system, but the backdoor subtext of all of these conspiracy theories and lies is an indirect, and in some cases quite direct, justification of apartheid in South Africa and a promotion of apartheid South African politics globally. Dylan Roof in 2014 massacred, murdered, committed an act of terrorism in a black church. He was a disturbed, disgusting young man in South Carolina whose resentment, personal failures, and emotional damage transferred itself into a fascination with white nationalism and a hatred of people of color, and also a fascination with Rhodesia, which is what is now Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe has followed a very different trajectory than South Africa. Robert Mugabe is a completely different leader than the South African leaders that liberated South Africa. Not just Nelson Mandela, but also Walter Sisulu, Govan Mbeki, Thabo Mbeki, and many other great fighters and strategists. That being said, regardless of Mugabe's many failures and obscenities and the ongoing problems of Zimbabwe, the liberation and the end of right rule in Rhodesia in 1979 is correctly recognized as the right thing. That is not in question. And if somebody is putting that in question, right. And that, is what connects a disgusting, disturbed young loser in 2014 to Fox, one of Fox's main broadcast talents, and our silly, putty-headed, racist trust fund baby president. We're going to get into this more, but first, here is a clip from Tucker Carlson on Fox News, feeding up and amping up the lies, distortion, conspiracy theories, and latent white nationalism about land expropriation in South Africa.
In an Orwellian turn, various news outlets suggested it was somehow racist to oppose the racist policies of the South African government, even Nazi-like. Watch.
He goes to race. And what better way than to give this neo-Nazi propaganda that white farmers are being killed in South Africa, when in fact that is not true, not based on them being white.
So show that clip to anyone who knows South Africa, who lives there, and see how they respond. They'll laugh bitterly. It's ludicrous. It's a lie. The president of the country, Cyril Ramaphosa, has pledged to change South Africa's constitution in order to legalize the seizure of property without compensation. That's currently being debated in the parliament in South Africa. Even now, the government is trying to confiscate 2 game farms after the owners refused to sell at a fraction of the market price. Everyone in the country understands what these are. They're racial attacks. Okay, say defenders of the South African government in this country, but previous generations in South Africa, under the apartheid government, also seized land on racial grounds. And by the way, that is absolutely true. They did do that. And it's one of the reasons that so many decent people in this country and around the world opposed apartheid. Apartheid was awful and wrong. Things have changed, though. Now our elites endorse the idea of a racial spoils system. And that's the scariest part. It's far more ominous than whatever the corrupt and incompetent government of South Africa is doing. Our ruling class now believes in collective punishment. That is the opposite of justice. Nobody is alleging that individual farm owners in South Africa stole their land. Instead, the claim is that people who resemble them did, and that's enough. Our elites see no problem with that standard. That should worry you a lot. If you got mugged, how would you feel about imprisoning someone who just happened to look like the mugger? How about the mugger's children? Should they be punished too? If those sound like insane questions, that's because they are insane questions. In the West, we punish only the guilty. We do not punish their descendants or everyone with the same hair and eye color. For more than 200 years, pretty much everybody in America agreed on those terms. Now, the people who run our country aren't so sure. Increasingly, they think that generational guilt seems like a fine standard.
So if that seems to you like a masterclass in right-wing sophistry, insane comparisons, and historical literacy, you're correct. Also, those who are running the country are racist idiots who tweet about South African land seizures based off of your segment, Tucker. This is wrong in not only its particulars, but even in its kind of framing orientation. There's obviously zero comparison between apprehending a mugger and addressing the historical and ongoing reality of a policy of land thefts that went on through the 80s in the apartheid government, where people's material resources and ability to make a livelihood were systemically discriminated against and stolen. And what the South African government is proposing, and what even the initial Rainbow Constitution provides for, is the sensible, small-scale, and in this case, extremely moderate redressing of land theft that has gone on and went on in apartheid South Africa for decades. First, a couple of reality checks here. Of course, actually, according to the best research and statistics we have available, attacks on white farms in South Africa are at a 20-year low. The expropriation process has not started because the bill has not passed. The new constitutional amendment has not even passed the South African parliament yet. It's in conversation. In 1998, Nelson Mandela said the following, and I'm going to quote now from The Independent. South Africa's President Nelson Mandela warned yesterday that only a fair redistribution of land and its former black owners would guarantee peace as the country emerged from apartheid minority rule. While speaking at an emotional ceremony in the sleepy town of the volatile KwaZulu-Natal province, held to mark the handing back of more than 600,000 hectares of land to former black farmers, Mr. Mandela, who became president in 1994 in the country's first democratic election, said that land reform that his government had enacted in the first year would help right the wrongs of the past. Our land reforms programs help address the injustice of apartheid. It fosters national reconciliation and stability. It also underpins economic growth and improves household welfare and food security. These are all undeniable truths. And the policy under Mandela was essentially that land would be sold back with government support to farmers that had been stolen from. And again, this is not historical ancient injustice. This is literally people that were alive still today who were kicked off of farms.
The immediately preceding generation.
It was, like now. Their land was stolen now. And yes, to do a stupid pedestrian analogy, if you stole some money from somebody 15 years ago, and that person and you were still alive, yes, you would have to pay restitution. By the way, and that's correct, there was a big project in terms of war crimes accountability for the stolen art, stolen money, stolen resources of Jews that were slaughtered in the Holocaust. There is a lot of historical basis for getting people their things back that were stolen by governments that oppressed and murdered them, such as in South Africa. Cyril Ramaphosa, South Africa's centrist, Davos-friendly, former Mine Executive Board member president, wrote in the Financial Times on the 19th of August that land redistribution is essential for South African democracy. He said, quote, "It's been nearly 25 years since South Africa became a democracy, yet the promise of the historical achievements have not been fully realized by millions of people who are unemployed and live in poverty." He goes on to say, talk about how, quote from the World Bank, "As the World Bank observes, South Africa's historical, highly skewed distribution of land and productive assets is a source of inequality and social fragility. It also argues that after skills, current distribution of land is the second biggest constraint to poverty reduction and shared prosperity. In order for South Africa to secure the future and to ensure an equitable and just humane development opportunities as envisioned by our first democratic president, Nelson Mandela, reforms of patterns of land ownership in South Africa is a critical issue. This is why the government has embarked on a process of accelerated land reform and why the South Africans are currently engaged in an intense debate over the prospect of expropriation of land without compensation as one of several measures to achieve this reform. Unfortunately, several commentators have confined their engagement on the matter to sound bites and not substance." I'm going to continue quoting on this because actually the president has outlined this well, President Ramaphosa. The land question goes back to more than a century, to the 1913 Native Lands Act, which provided legislative form to process of dispossession that has been underway since colonial times. It confined the country's African population to slightly more than 10% of the land, reserved the rest for white minority. These laws alienated the majority of our citizens from their livelihoods and their places of birth and burial, stripped them of their assets, and deprived them of their livelihoods. Even now, the dispossession of land continues to determine the prospect of millions of South Africans, and it holds back the country's economic development by restricting ownership to a land of small minority. The apartheid regime ensured that one of the country's most valuable economic resources would be severely underutilized. During this time, the Department of Rural Development and Land Reform released the rights of a land audit to establish land ownership patterns. Among other insights, the forthcoming land audit emerged that individual companies and trusts own 90% of land in South Africa and the state 10%. Of this 90%, individuals own 34%, trusts own 31%, companies own 25%, and community-based organizations own 4%, with cooperative ownership at 1%. In terms of farms and agricultural holdings, 97% of total agricultural holdings are owned by 7% of landowners. For decades, the country's assets, its land, its minerals, its human resources, its enterprises have been owned and controlled in a way that has prevented the extraction of their full value. And this is, of course, fully inside neoliberal market logic, but one that says we're going to need to empower a little bit of opportunity for meritocracy. There's nothing remotely radical about this. He goes on to assure that this plan will not erode property rights and that it will focus on areas of underused resources and areas where people have clear title holdings, and in other areas that are like not used land or abandoned buildings. Basically, this policy is social democratic moderation and is essential for the survival of South Africa. And the only people that would have any interest in opposing it are oligarchs globally who recognize somewhere in their senses that we're going to need to do this type of approach internationally. Jeremy Corbyn said a year ago during a housing crisis, why not just use second homes of the rich to house people? And he was absolutely right. And we're going to need to do more of that internationally. It's a boogeyman of white nationalists and racists who stoke racial paranoia among white identity politics and people with zero historical awareness. And also, number three, it is going to be used politically by someone like Julius Malema, who runs the Economic Freedom Fighters, which is South Africa's third party, who was formerly of the ANC. And Malema, unfortunately, while he has some absolutely correct left critiques of capital and racial control of South Africa, is a populist in a negative sense and doesn't appear to have the type of kind of a long-term Marxist strategy that someone like Ronnie Kasrils says that South Africa needs to achieve its economic, its second liberation, not just its political one. And you're going to see Tucker and all these other guys run around pulling quotes from Julius Malema talking about white people and not deal with Cyril Ramaphosa outlining a centrist case based on World Bank studies and the most basic historical awareness in the Financial Times. Anybody who's talking about land expropriation in South Africa is anything other but a necessary and positive step for broader democracy and equality is an illiterate or a racist or most likely both.
It's funny, you know, when you use metaphors in communicating political ideas, it's usually because it puts you on more solid ground than you would. So I just want to replay this part from Tucker here.
Yep.
If you got mugged, how would you feel about imprisoning someone who just happened to look like the mugger? How about the mugger's children? Should they be punished too?
My question would be, did the mugger's children inherit my watch?
Right. There you go. I would actually say yes. Right? If the mugger's children's entire wealth was built off of a crime that happened to you, all within everybody's lifespans, there is going to be some redistribution. And by the way, if somebody hits me back with, well, what about Native Americans? Yes. Native Americans absolutely should get massive redistribution and restitution from the U.S. government.
And the problem
100%.
The problem here doesn't strike me so much as property rights, but when those rights are coupled with huge inheritance schemes, like the ones we all have basically in the United States, cut the estate tax, like that literally makes historical injustice more important when you allow those gains to carry over.
Precisely. If you want historical injustice to matter less, then tax inheritance. Every fortune was built on a great crime, David.
You know, and when this happened in South Africa, when this kind of land grab by the whites and European settler colonialists happened, we're talking about the black population only receiving around 7% of the land in South Africa, despite making up 67% of the land. That's right. And there's all these really cynical academic arguments that were trotted forward by white nationalists and folks about what they would call the empty land theory, which was a fairly fallacious anthropological argument about South Africa, saying that the land wasn't used by the native South Africans, etc. Which, to bring up the Native American example, is fairly analogous in what people would argue when they said that it was okay for the white settlers to come in and take the land from the Native Americans. And we also hear frequently a fairly similar argument from Zionists when they say that the Palestinians don't have a historical claim. So there's a lot of continuity when it comes to land grabs by colonial powers, and we should keep that in mind when we're talking about the ways that we want to fix that issue, because the situation in South Africa is still unconscionable. I mean, the amount of land that is owned by these folks who came in and violently took over the land it still lives today. And without doing anything about it, you can't have this kind of economic equality or justice even.
And it's not Zimbabwe. Look, just in terms of now, again, it's a broad proposition. Should Zimbabwe have had land redistribution and expropriation? Yes, of course. What happened in Zimbabwe was a violent process that made no distinctions in terms of productivity and ownership, which South Africa does, right? Like, there were actually literally some small-scale farms that happened to be owned by white people that were a productive part of the agricultural sector and would not be top of the list of focus for getting, like, land back into use, right? And also, it was given away to political cronies. It wasn't part of an actual cohesive process. And as soon as somebody says, the Zimbabwe example, again, they're just showing their racism. If you can't recognize the fundamental difference between the governance strategies of South Africa and Zimbabwe and the paths they've chosen, you're a racist, historical illiterate, period. The question is how the policy is implemented. How is it done? Not the correctness of it. There absolutely needs to be land expropriation without compensation in South Africa. And no plan on the table is violent. Nothing would leave a small-scale farmer off his land or destitute. Nothing. It's not on the table.
That's the sick sob story that these kind of white nationalists try to bring up. It's just some hardworking small farmers.
It's a lie.
Being attacked by the mob. It is a lie, and it's a very cynical one, because at the end of the day, what we're talking about is the distribution of power. That's right. In a major nation, and one that's been continued to be maintained even after the destruction of the apartheid regime.
That was the agreement. They said, we will keep, and it was not just the apartheid remnants were part of it. It's the Davos world. When the South Africans achieved liberation, they achieved a political liberation, and the global financial system essentially said, in some cases literally in meetings in places like New York and Davos, these are the rules of the road. And all of your plans, which by that point of liberation were already moderate social democratic Keynesianism, which still would have meant land redistribution, massive redistribution of resources, because it was a racist capital oligarchy. That's what you do when you achieve liberation. You redistribute the resources. Period. Period. And this is not, I mean, I'm sorry, it just enrages me, because I knew that this was going to be a talking point based on racism and historical literacy, and I knew it was going to wind up in the fat fuck president's Twitter feed.
And as a consequence of that, as well as the narrative that people have been receiving in the main in like American media, people who might not be very familiar with South Africa, and you know, the lots of things that are going on there, are now getting this very bizarre narrative, which is trying to legitimize this white nationalist critique of what's happening in South Africa. You've seen that even in CNN or even Washington Post. I mean, the way that people are talking about it now is as if, you know, the Tucker Carlson position is somewhat legitimate, right? But maybe, overzealous on Tucker's. No, it's absolutely illegitimate. It's absolutely racist, and it's absolutely a white nationalist position.
It is a white nationalist racist position, and the closest analog in mainstream discourse for people in the 1980s who were doing bullshit arguments that you didn't need sanctions, that you didn't need to back the ANC, that there could be some type of market-driven democratization. And Chris Kobach studied under Samuel Huntington at Harvard, who explicitly argued against giving everybody the right to vote in South Africa. And the Reagan administration vetoed a sanctions package against South Africa. These people are racist. They're white nationalist capitalists, and they are political enemies of anybody who has faith in humanity and opposes bigotry. And what Cyril Ramaphosa is proposing is so moderate and so commonsensical that if it does not happen, it will empower toxic forces across supposedly the ideological spectrum, but really actually just different variants of right-wing populism showing up in different guises. It's disgusting. And it's disgusting that people don't know that history, and it's disgusting that within such a short period of time, something that was an unequivocal moral gain that everybody, including people that I'm sure didn't believe in it, had to at least pay lip service to, they're flipping on. It's fucking disgusting. And I would support any expropriation without compensation of any of Tucker Carlson's resources. Little Swanson.
We're coming for that.
Yeah, we're coming. Yeah.
Frozen food fortune.
Yeah, little frozen food heiress. Fuck you.
Those crimes against culinary taste. Will not be perpetuated onto future generations.
Absolutely
buddy.
Not. Absolutely.
Gotta nip that in the bud.
Absolutely not. All right, let's do a little shout out, shall we? This is the part. New people, I should say. For new people watching, we always have, we've got our openings, we've got our banter post-opening, we've got our historically oriented cold open, we've got our shout-out, we've got our gulag, we've got our Griscom, which we're not even calling the economic minute anymore. Apparently he's gotten so exalted, he's already just in last name status. And now is now it's time for the shout-out. And we have the sound ready for that, right? Danarchy. I don't want to get greedy, but if Danarchy could give us a shout-out beat, that would be ill.
Top of the line professionalism.
Let's get to the shout-out. Shout-out.
Creepy.
Shout-out.
Weird. I think that's creepy. It's incredible.
Shout-out.
This is crazy.
Shout-out.
This is out of control.
Shout-out.
That's creepy.
That's weird. That's creepy. Thank you, DJ Danarchy. Okay, let's stay on political prisoner scheme. Lula da Silva has increased his lead in the presidential election in Brazil. It's an election, of course. Lula has been imprisoned on incredibly flimsy corruption charges. His appeals have not been exhausted. His request for habeas corpus was actually granted by one judge, and in subversion of the law, he was not released in prison by his prosecutor/judge. Yes, that Judge Moro literally holds the same role at once in his attack on Lula. The second candidate after Lula, Jorge Bolsonaro, is polling at around 20%. He is a fascist candidate who's praised, mass violence against people, joked about rape. He's being advised by Steve Bannon. And the traditional oligarch parties who have much more serious and credible corruption allegations are continuing to attempt to silence and block Lula from participating in the election. Lula now is winning in the first round with 39%. Jair Bolsonaro is at 19%. And Fernando Haddad, who will most likely take Lula's place if this undemocratic turn continues, looks to be emerging in the polls as well, because the strategy is probably going to be for Lula to transfer his support onto him. I'm going to play a brief clip. They just launched the PT, the Brazilian Workers' Party, their ad campaign for 2018 for Lula. This is from Lula's speech that he gave to a crowd of supporters before he was taken to prison. And he said, the powerful may kill 1, 2, or 3 roses, but they will never stop the coming of spring. And this is Lula and his, that Lula voice. We'll just play a second of this ad.
Os poderosos podem matar 1, 2 ou 3 rosas, mas jamais conseguirão deter a chegada da primavera.
Lula's dope, man. Lula is a political prisoner and a giant.
It's like a dump truck full of gravel, his voice.
But like in a good way.
In a good way, yeah.
Yeah, that's what's so funny about it, is it actually sounds really good. Yeah. Remember Lula, Amy Goodman? Like, Amy, I will make love to you. She's like, President Lula, this is Amy Goodman. You have said that the prosecution of you is politically motivated. How do you plan to restore democracy in Brazil? Well, Amy, it's a good question. You are a great fighter for democracy yourself.
Like he could voice children's puppets for like Sesame Street without changing his voice at all.
I don't know, man. I just admire the hell out of the guy. He's just such a bull. And it's just so disgusting. And that's why every single, the landless movement, the labor unions, because there's an assault. It's not just on Lula. There's the assassination of Marielle Franco. There's austerity, which is plunging Brazil back into poverty and hunger and hacking away at all of the Workers' Party government's great accomplishments, which is obviously what the oligarchy hates.
People need to recognize too that these kind of events aren't just happenstance. Like there is an actual movement behind them that is targeting the left wing in Brazil. So any kind of justification that people try to find for the imprisonment of Lula, you have to understand that that is a defense of an actual right wing coup attempt.
Yeah, and your middle class moralism is not going to work for actual politics.
Yeah.
We're in a world today, and why one of the reasons that I do think Brasilia is so important is because it's going to reflect and parallel other situations we face. And also Lula, who governed in this tremendously successful social democratic fashion, where in fact a lot of people who are dangerous and corrupt got a lot richer, and they shouldn't have. This shows that you need to break up the media monopolies. Brazil is dominated by Fox News type politics. The judicial reforms, which Lula signed into law, were used not to universally go against corruption, which of course implicates all parties, including his party in Brazil, but to attack him and the moderate center left and the actual left. That's how it works. And I'll say again, if Lula, maybe, and it's actually, it's extraordinary if you reach it, how flimsy the evidence is. There's no evidence he ever lived in this apartment. There's no deed in his name. There's no confirmation. And that's all they got on him. And Dilma, there's nothing. She was impeached on an accounting technicality. Whereas the current president, they've stopped investigations on, people in power now. Michel Temer is on tape talking about bribing people. But I don't care if Lula took an apartment. I don't care. And by the way, all of the praise that he used to get in the Western press, I don't think he did, but I don't care if he did. And all the praise he used to get in the Western press for moderating, including doing things like cutting the deals with the traditional corrupt Brazilian political system. It's just that in his case, he governed in a way that took 30 million people out of poverty. So this sort of like airy, fairy nonsense, middle-class, elitist, context-free corruption discourse is an enemy of historical analysis and the left.
Yeah, I think that sort of defiance should be celebrated wherever you find it, especially when you have an awareness of what those guys are actually up against.
They're up against fascists. And by the way, when we talked about Harvey K, about how to use that word, right? And I think fascist absolutely applies to Trump, Republicans, and so on. But when you're talking about Brazil, you are literally talking about oligarchy and fascists, period. You're talking about, there's people in Brazilian parliament who have like murder raps, okay? And we're imprisoning probably the best president of the modern era. Absolutely in the time he governed, without a doubt. All right. And I would say, there were over 30 members of Congress, including Bernie Sanders and Ro Khanna and Barbara Lee and Frank Pallone, who signed a letter. This is something that you can, and all of the AFL-CIO and all global unions have sent people there to be in solidarity with Lula. That's something to thank people for who signed the letter, and something I would, keep putting out. I'd like to see Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez talk about the political imprisonment of Lula. I think this is something that, we should keep encouraging good people in Congress to talk about, because that really matters. It really matters that the former Mexican foreign minister wrote that New York Times column, who was of a center-right government, saying Lula should run. Because as in everywhere else, the fascist right in Brazil doesn't give a fuck, but the Henrique Cardozos, who was the president before Lula, who's an upper-crust academic who clearly is deeply resentful that Lula was a better and more charismatic president than him, he felt the need to write a bitchy column in the Financial Times. And clearly it's like, this guy is not liking the heat of all of the good coverage about what's really happening in Brazil, because that might implicate his standing at Paris and New York cocktail parties. So the letters from Congress people really matter. So I would say, that will help with our solidarity with Brazil and with Lula and with the global left. Yeah, we could do this. Let's get to this. Speaking of disconnected nonsense middle-class moralism, there is a pernicious public influence by the name of Steve Pinker.
Stinker for short.
Stinker. I like it. Stinker Pinker.
Stinky Pinker.
Stinky Pink. Excuse me. He what do we say? He's intellectual dark web adjacent.
He looks like a very confused founding father that's been time traveled to the present day.
Right. But he's not gonna slum it enough to do like endless like round tables about like, I don't know, like
he knows when to avoid the camera.
Right. Like, is it mean to talk about white genocide with, Dave Rubin and Ben Shapiro, whatever the hell it is that those people talk. Like, he has a sense of like, I don't want to be on the same couch that Mike Cernovich was on the couch on, probably.
I'm going to tiptoe around your little IQ experiment, Sam Harris. I'll get you when we talk about how capitalism's making life better for everybody on the planet.
Right. So Steve Pinker has a new book out. I'm actually, I forgot the...
Enlightenment Now,
which is essentially a kind of manifesto of delusion for the modern... prayer, delusion... and empathy-free fantasy life of the modern managerial class. And it's like, it's a type of book and the type of writing and perspective that makes you at least give the resistance people having a meltdown credit, because at least they're concerned about something. This is a sort of like if Thomas Friedman was less of an unintentionally entertaining writer and, actually, I guess in fairness to Friedman, was a less unintentionally, entertaining writer and had absolutely zero interest in any kind of personal interaction with all the people he's writing about. At least Friedman will try to get himself a conversation with a cab driver in Amman to back his, we're all going to have iPhones and everything's going to be great fantasy life. And a big part of Pinker's propaganda on behalf of the sort of self-evident benefits of capitalism and rationality, which, we did an illicit history on this with Merrick Sullivan, People Should Become Patrons and Listen. There's a huge amount of, historical literacy, overlooking imperialism, colonialism, racism, labor unions, the role of power, all the stuff you'd expect.
State investments.
State investments. This guy is not, he's just he's not quite libertarian. He's more sort of third way neoliberal, very unimaginative, very boring stuff. Wouldn't be kind of new to anybody. But one of his things that he really hangs his shingle on is the idea of poverty decreasing. And in this segment, Mehdi Hasan on Al Jazeera does an excellent job of grilling him, and also a really great job of, once again, be skeptical of numbers and statistics and quote-unquote facts, especially if you're talking about an actual thing like poverty. These things don't mean very much at all. And the skew and the presupposition and the design of how you even ask a question like, what is poverty, is fundamental to the enterprise. And of course, Pinker is totally unable to even assess that. And here he is hanging on to his numbers while Mehdi Hasan challenges him to enlarge the conversation.
And the graphs go in a particular direction.
You did not check by ignoring data that doesn't fit your thesis.
Absolutely false. No.
Well,
which data?
Okay, well, let's talk about it. Let's take global poverty.
Yeah.
You have a chapter in the book on prosperity. You want to make the case that the world is more prosperous and less poor than ever before, and you point to data showing the number of people living on the extreme poverty line, as defined by the World Bank today at $1.90 a day, is down from 2 billion in 1990 to 700 million in 2015. The world is becoming middle class, you say. But surely you know, I know you know, because you're a very clever, well-qualified guy, that there are numerous studies and a number of scholars who dispute that poverty measure as arbitrary, as inaccurate, that in reality, to quote from a recent academic paper by an anthropologist at the LSE, quote, around 4 billion people remain in poverty today, around 2 billion remain hungry, more than ever before in history.
That completely irrelevant to which way the numbers have gone. Of course, the definition of extreme poverty is going to be arbitrary. If you make it higher, then more people will be in poverty. If you make it lower, fewer people.
Exactly.
But no matter what cutoff you set, the direction is downward.
That's not true. That's
yes,
not,
it is.
If you look at the work done by Jason Hickel at the LSE, if you take a poverty line of $5, 1 billion people have been added to the number of people on that poverty measure since 1981. The trend shows the exact opposite when you move it to $5 a day.
In terms of the proportion of people in poverty by that criteria?
No, the sheer number of people.
Yes,
1 billion people have been added to the poverty total since 1981.
Yes, but billions of people have been added to the world as a whole. What's relevant is the proportion.
But you also used absolute numbers in your book. You said it's gone down from 2 billion to 700 million.
Well, I note that by at least the most widely accepted definition of extreme poverty, it's interesting that the absolute numbers have declined as well. But the main point is the proportion, because more people have been added, so anything is going to increase.
You say widely accepted, but this is my point. You don't acknowledge in the book, there's no caveats where you say, for example, Professor Lant Pritchett, Harvard colleague of yours, a development economist who studies this stuff, says the poverty line shouldn't be $1.90, it should be $12, $15 a day. And when you make that simple statistical change, the entire picture of poverty changes, and the arguments in your book basically fall apart, do they?
That's exactly right. And that is exactly the fundamental thing right here. It's not just a number. What's the context you're using? I'll say in Brazil, when I talk about the Lula number of those amount of people being turned out of poverty, and by the way, there's environmental problems with this, but that was very tangibly demonstrated in terms of like people going from living in complete deprivation to having health care, having their kids in school, getting access to credit, and upgrading their housing and consumer finances. I want you guys to jump in a second, but first let's read. This is Jason Hickel, who is the academic that Mehdi Hasan cites there. He has a great thread about this on Twitter. He's an anthropologist and writer at The Guardian and other areas and other papers. He says, 1, for the sake of argument, let's accept for the moment that the percentage of people in poverty is the only relevant indicator of progress. Even so, there's still a flaw in Pinker's claim and that of his supporters at the Cato Institute and the Adam Smith Institute.
Always worthwhile to point that connection out.
Always worth pointing that connection out, indeed. Pinker's claim is not a neutral argument about progress. He claims that progress has been driven specifically by globalization and free market capitalism. But there are a number of problems with this claim. From 1980 to 2000, the percentage of people under 5 a day increased from 70.8% to 73% due to structural adjustment programs that were imposed by the World Bank and IMF in this period. In other words, precisely during the period when free market globalization was at its purest and most aggressive, global poverty was getting worse even according to the proportions. What is more, for Pinker to claim for Pinker's claim to work, he can't include China, where economic integration has been in state-led terms. Take China out, and the percentage of people under 5 a day increased from 62% in 1980 to 67% in 2000, and did not improve on its 1980 levels until 2010. Ultimately, the morally relevant metric of progress is neither percentage or absolute numbers, but the extent of global poverty vis-a-vis our capacity to end it. And by that measure, we are doing worse than at any time in history. Hashtag inequality.
That is a mic drop.
That's a total mic
Suck
drop.
it, stinker.
Yep. Suck it and choke on it. We're going to get Jason Hinkle on TMBS.
Yeah.
But I mean, and that point is so true. I mean, when you look at the growth of free market capitalism over the past 30 years, you also have to include in that the huge increase in commodification of things that were available to folks before. This is even an old idea. Karl Marx, before he was, the Marx, before he was writing Capital, before he was a communist, when he was just a young person, and he was a journalist. This was actually one of his first observations. Was he was in this? I can't remember the name of the town offhand, but he was in a small town in Germany, and they started to privatize the forests around them, so people were no longer allowed to, purchase firewood, and people were freezing to death. Despite the fact that there was plentiful amount of wood and opportunity for them. And the thing is that a lot of folks forget is that when we do start commodifying the world around us, that also means that there's certain things that people are no longer able to have access to, despite being able to historically have access to it. So it's like the whole aspect of global financial markets growing into areas where they haven't is not necessarily something that's going to be progressive, obviously. And it's very clear and it can be explained very simply the ways that it can be very uprooting for a lot of folks, especially if you're not someone who has been engaged in wage labor. Folks who have been more based their economic activity on and growing food for themselves and for their own community, not necessarily selling their labor. Now having everything becoming a commodity is incredibly damaging to those folks.
Right.
And, I think it's really annoying the way we just automatically assume it's capitalists that are responsible for the rise, even using his lower poverty level, right? The amount of people that have reached that threshold, and not just technological advancement and things like that, right?
Right. Exactly. We're going to do a little pitch, and then we're going to go to the Griscom. We're not calling it the Economic Minute anymore. Because
we just got to go to Griscom.
He's like fucking Prince or Academi. You're like Academi. It used to be Blackwater, but now it's Academi.
I mean, I don't think Prince would use his actual last name, although he could, and it would fit, and you wouldn't know it's a surname necessarily. Yeah. Prince.
We have a proposal for murdering migrants.
Do you want to be a monarch? We have the army.
Right. Neo-feudal times. All right, guys. Thanks, everybody. We're at, I believe it was 1,632 or 33 at the start of today's show. We're continuing to grow significantly, and there's a massive amount of content you get as a TMBS patron. You get Woke Bros with Waz and myself. You get theory readings, videos, and selection curated by our very own David Griscom. You have a thriving, aggressive, amazing Discord community that is on there 24/7. They're building community. They're generating projects on and offline. I do Ask Me Anythings in there regularly. For people at 21 and above, I do regular group Skype calls. In fact, the next one is tomorrow. Plus, of course, every Sunday you get an illicit history or an idea primer. Check out the series with Corey Pine on Silicon Valley fascism. Check out the series on Jamaican politics from the Shower Posse, which helped open up cocaine and crack distribution networks in Florida, New York, and Canada in the 1980s as a basically pretty direct result of U.S. destabilization of the Michael Manley government in Jamaica. There is an illicit history coming up this Sunday with Milton Alamati on Kofi Annan, Pan-Africanism, and the United Nations. Plus, one soon with Jean Bajlan on Turkey and a potential global economic crisis. There are so many in there that I can't even chronicle them all. There's just
like over 40, like close to 50 now.
Yeah, Natalie Shore, Why America Doesn't Have Single-Payer Healthcare, the history of the illicit history of corporate lobbying against the only way to do healthcare, period, and one that we know is a major priority for the United States. Plus, you got the post games, which are funny. We play games, we take Discord questions, we take calls from our patrons, and all of the animations and comedy bits and everything else. This is our YouTube channel. Subscribe, share clips, keep growing the TMBS universe. At 2,000 patrons, we are going to have some more things to tell you about that we're cooking up. Thanks, everybody. There's a whole other show going on with those drops, man. All right. This is a music-free... David Griscom, and look this up, guys. We're going to play this soon. David Griscom requested an really old song from the 90s by a group called In Vogue. In fact, can we play just a second of it? Just give me... today I'm talking about a prison strike. And I was like, whoa, I think that would not be very tasteful, David.
We need to make socialism social again.
We need to... Anyways, the point actually being is that tonight's Griscom segment it needs to be free of music, because he's talking about something that, first of all, is incredibly courageous of people, something we need to all have utmost solidarity with, and is even more disturbing than usual. So even apparently the Richard Wolff messages will not even be around for this one. All right, go ahead.
Yeah, so this week we're going to talk about something that folks, that capitalists would like to say is a pre-capitalist formation. But forced labor is very much a part of capitalist history, forced labor and slavery. In protest against that, 17 states prisoners across 17 states are participating in a strike action, coordinating sit-ins, hunger strikes, work stoppages, and they are also engaging in commissary boycotts. We just need to talk a moment about the scale of the prison population of the United States, which is over 2 million people. By far, we have the most incarcerated amount of people in the world. Not only are these folks incarcerated, but as we know, a lot of these people are in prison for very silly and misdemeanor crimes, such as having drugs, marijuana, things that we all partake in, or some of us partake in.
Speak for yourself.
Excuse me.
Every weekend or so, or maybe I am just speaking about myself, but it is a very serious issue, because these folks who are incarcerated...
Oh, that doesn't surprise me.
Are encouraged and forced into labor, and in many states they aren't even compensated for that. In 5 states, Texas, Alabama, Arkansas, Florida, and Georgia, prison workers aren't even compensated for the work that they do. In other states, they are compensated a laughable amount of money, oftentimes pennies on the dollar. So we're talking about wages like 23 cents an hour to $1.15 an hour. In California, which we talked about last week, we have prisoners who are being encouraged to go and fight fires on the front lines. By the way, that's a job that is compensated handsomely. We're talking, 6-figure incomes for firefighters, while these folks, if they are being compensated, are being compensated a paltry amount. Right. And let's not forget that the U.S. government has a corporation that profits from prison labor. The Department of Justice advertises the use of prison labor for call centers, saying corporations using prisoners to work their call centers is one of the best kept secrets in business. They also highlight their cost-effective labor pool. And let's get this right. This is a power issue. This is a race issue. And this is an issue of capital. Cheap labor from prisoners is used to undermine labor rights for other workers. In many states, these folks are allowed to work outside of the prisons for private corporations, and they are paid pennies on the dollar of a normal worker. Prisoners are not allowed to form labor unions, etc. Not only are workers underpaid or unpaid at all, many of them are forced into horrible conditions. And let's just talk about a very recent case. 33-year-old Frank Ellington was hoping to receive parole through Alabama's work release program. Ellington had received a life prison sentence in Alabama. He was allowed to work, and these were supposed to cut days off of his life prison sentence. He was working at a poultry factory in Alabama, and if anyone knows anything about those industries, the poultry industry is one of the most dangerous and unhealthy industries to work in. At a late night shift, Ellington's arm was caught by a saw blade and he was killed.
Oh my God.
The Southern Poverty Law Center maintains that the workers at the factory had not had the proper safety training to shut down the machine that killed Frank Ellington, and the demand for speed and efficiency could have been a driving factor that put him in this dangerous situation. Trying to work off a life sentence, Frank Ellington was incentivized to put his life at risk to avoid an equally dangerous life behind bars. States like Alabama encourage prisoners to enter into these work release programs when they could be paid much less than typical workers, undercutting labor competition in the region and skirting safety regulations. This is exploitation and it's inhuman and it must end. And I just wanted to read out in solidarity with the prisoners on strike their demands, because there is a very good list of demands. 1, immediate improvements to the conditions of prisons and prison policies that recognize the humanity of imprisoned men and women. An immediate end to prison slavery. All persons imprisoned in any place of detention under the United States jurisdiction must be paid the prevailing wage in their state or territory for their labor.
Yes.
3, the Prison Litigation Reform Act must be rescinded, allowing imprisoned humans a proper channel to address grievances and violations of their rights. 4, the Truth in Sentencing Act and the Sentencing Reform Act must be rescinded so that imprisoned humans have a possibility of rehabilitation than parole. No human shall be sentenced to death by incarceration or serve any sentence without the possibility of parole. 5, an immediate end to the racial overcharging, oversentencing, and parole denials of black and brown humans. Black humans shall no longer be denied parole because the victim of the crime was white, which is a particular problem in the southern states. 6, an immediate end to racist gang enhancement laws targeting black and brown humans. 7, no imprisoned humans shall be denied access to rehabilitation programs at their place of detention because of their label as a violent offender. 8, state prisons must be funded specifically to offer more rehabilitation services. 9, Pell Grants must be reinstated in all U.S. states and territories. 10, the voting rights of all confined citizens serving prison sentences, pretrial detainees, and so-called ex-felons must be counted. Representation is demanded. All voices count. And without a doubt, that this is, a very serious and encouraging action that we're seeing going on. And it's important to understand, too, just as just for added context, that in the U.S., prisoners do not have the same kind of legal rights to petition or sue the government,
right,
making it even worse when they're put into these very dangerous working conditions, as we saw in Alabama. So just as a final note, we're certainly watching this very closely. The strike began this week. It is supposed to be, I believe, a month long. And, it's very difficult to get information from inside the prisons because, these people are literally held in by walls, and we have prison wardens who obviously don't want the scale and extent of these actions to be known to the public. But we'll be watching, I'll be certainly watching this very closely, and, all solidarity with all prisoners.
All solidarity with all prisoners. And again, these demands could not be more obvious and necessary. It's incredible.
It's not let us all out.
That's right. That's what's so funny is like the action and the courage in that situation of a strike is breathtaking and deserves nothing but solidarity and admiration. And the demand set is the policy of any remotely civilized, decent society. And a pure indictment that it's not already the case.
And the inclusion of the Pell Grants is also an interesting demand too, because you see, if you do any work or people who do work with prisoners, those are kind of systems that make it very clear the way that our society works, and that can be a very good way for people to really understand like the dynamics of American capitalist society. And a lot of folks, come out of those systems with a lot of solidarity for people and a lot of solidarity for other oppressed communities, and with a larger understanding dynamically of the American system. So it's encouraging to see these kinds of solidarity movements, and we'll see how this ends. But I'll tell you, it's been really exciting to watch. And I was reading today that it's actually has even expanded. There's prisoners in Nova Scotia are joining the strike too.
Oh,
so it's actually expanding from outside the United States as well.
That's incredibly exciting. My friend Artesia Belthorpe, not Artesia, who was one of a handful of people, really a kind of brain trust, who helped this show happen just about a year ago. Mark, Ben, Artesia, David, Sean, Richard. She is somebody, she is someone who's close to her. We're going to talk about it, and she's been public with this, who's just getting out and re-entering after a prison sentence. And she's actually going to be very fun post-game guest soon. And we're going to talk about her work in the culture, music, reality TV, and stuff like that, but also the specifics of this kind of situation as like lived in a very specific circumstance. So there's really few things that could be more important. And I also want to take that to thank everybody who was part of that initial brain trust for what has been a really successful first year.
You know, I think the media environment is actually much more conducive to this sort of thing than it used to be.
Mm-hmm.
Like those demands, right? This is the second time we've played them out on air. And you can just imagine if this was like the 1980s, they would have been probably boiled down to the most uncharitable ones that they could in a regular newspapers.
Oh,
I'm not talking about National
absolutely.
Review, right?
No, regular.
And this would
definitely.
be seem like, oh, look at them getting out of hand.
Definitely.
And instead, like there's like they're it's like they're deliberating policy somehow. The story of how this has been organized. I would be very interested in a deep dive
book,
into that.
documentaries.
Yeah.
Like we're gonna look to figure out. I mean, this is the type of thing that like I want to interview people involved with this, but I don't want to really bother them right now. You know what I mean? But yes, this is like there was a lot of stories out of this that are going to need to be told.
It's very true. You know, I've just been thinking, you know, there is a good history too of you know, prison movements in the U.S. and I've just been thinking a lot. I know this is more of a hip hop show than a country music show, but you know,
no, dude, it's all renegade culture is welcome.
I know. But you know, I've been, you know, I love,
even your
I love
inbred
really,
shit.
you know, I love Willie Nelson and
Can we give Griscom
and Johnny Cash?
Can we give him a little Cash or a little Nelson?
You know, but it's so inspiring. I don't know. Like I listen to those kind of movements, and like the messages of a lot of those songs are so political, and there was such an understanding of solidarity among prisoners. You know, I mean, fucking, you know, Johnny Cash's you know, prison concerts. I mean, that's a radical moment.
That is radical.
You know what I mean? And you know,
Folsom Prison, full
you can
concert.
be the conservative over here. Actually, Garth Brooks is a Democrat, I believe.
Oh, we just blew up his spot.
Yo, serious that cutting edge cultural intelligence on TMBS right there. Well, actually, I'll tell you what. If you look up Garth Brooks on,
Check out his campaign contribution.
check out his campaign contribution. They're all publicly available, man.
Him and Dale Earnhardt Jr.
He maxed out to Obama. Can't be all bad. Who amongst us?
Actually, I think Garth Brooks played at Obama's inauguration.
I'm sure he did. Remember, like, 08 Obama's always like, Rick Warren, Garth Brooks. As many mayo-headed white people as possible.
What? Imagine, like, you know, if the world really was a simulation, like Elon Musk thinks it is.
Right.
If you could just like change different variables and like, okay, Obama, everything's going to be the same, but you're going to dress and culturally act like you're still from Kansas and a big like Garth Brooks head, and you actually love all that stuff. And
dude, it's great. Yeah, like instead of it is legit. Like instead of Stevie Wonder at the White House, it's always just like Travis Tritt.
Yeah, and instead of shooting hoops, I don't know, it's like playing. I guess he did golf too, but it'd be it wouldn't be golf.
No, like horseshoes.
Yeah, exactly.
Obama's just like. No, actually, I don't really. I mean, everybody plays football, so it doesn't really work.
Yeah, I don't know if
what would that be?
It's
hockey. Just have to hockey. So I was the only black guy that liked hockey.
Check out this slap shot, Joe.
Fight. It's not even. It's like half country and then half just like scumbag, like
no,
white
you know what it is?
culture.
He goes mudding like just in a 4x4 Bronco.
Hitting the trails today.
CNN's like, this is the 40th day President Obama has been mudding of the 365 work days he's been in office.
And then like all the racists are confused. They're just like,
exactly. It's
I
just
like how the black guy's not working.
I mean, if that's what not working is, what are we complaining about?
That's kind of like the what was the joke we made fun of? Who was that really awful candidate that ran the Democrat in Georgia? Who was this?
Ossoff.
That Ossoff was just like, instead of like the awkward suburban white teenager who's like trying to like adopt like hip hop culture, he's just like early 30s and just like, Well, other kids wanted to be like Wu-Tang, but I just really want to be the white Barack Obama.
Let me be clear. I have never heard of Waka Flocka Flame.
But I have heard of Cowboy Troy.
Yeah. Never heard of him, but I would like to somehow. My parents are from different suburbs in Georgia, which is sort of like dreams of my father, right? It's just like really boutique, like super boutique, like white guy who wants to be black. That was basically all John Ossoff was. It was like, dude, I get that you like Barack Obama. Do you have anything else that could get us to pull off this massive upset, you fucking loser?
I have not seen Atlanta, but Kennesaw County is very nice.
Now we're back to country Obama. It's like, what are you watching on vacation? Well, I'm going money, and then I'm going to watch Bridges in Madison County.
Outdoor Life Network, bitch. You're shooting a bear.
Shot a bear in the goddamn face.
Now you can see the fence around it. I think this was a canned hunt. How'd you get the camera in front of you before you took the shot? That's what I want to know.
Unbelievable.
It's not a real hunt.
Yeah, right. He's out like, like those Obama photo ops when he's always like, he's just like, all right, guys, got everything? Good? He's just like out ice fishing. Like, all right, we got everything? It's good.
Leave it in my ass house.
All right, we have a few more things to get to, but let's start taking a few phone calls. You're calling from an 818 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from? Welcome to the Michael Brooks Show. This better be going somewhere.
I think they should just hold music.
It's not a bad prank. Oh, this son of a bitch has multiple ones going on. You're calling from a 509 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from? 509.
Bro.
Wait just 1 second, Don Jr. We have to fix something on our end. Just give us 1 second. This is, go ahead. You're calling from a 509 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
Yes, bro. My name is John Miller, and I am a legal lawyer for Don Jr.
Okay.
And I have to say, I totally agree with that last guy, that it's super unfair that people go to jail, and it's really total bullshit, ipso facto, for an example, that there's people who go to jail for not paying taxes, as an example, or for sometimes maybe accidentally doing like a 17-year-old who totally looks 21 and lied about her age.
You think I'm going to
It
jail?
happened to one of my bros, and it's a total tragedy. And for other examples, like just money stuff mostly, and it just seems like total bullshit. And I think that really people who do crimes should probably get credit for like trying stuff, And so that's my first point.
Okay. All right.
Now, I'm sitting here in my lawyer office with my U.S. law book, and I will also say that collusioning is not in this book, okay? Even though Hillary did collusioning, it's not in the book.
It's not in the book.
So that's my next point.
I know you don't
And
represent.
also,
yeah, okay, go ahead. Sorry.
well, I just think it's pretty unfair that nobody wants to talk about the porn stars that Hillary paid off for things that she did. And I'm willing to go there if I have to, but let's just say some things have happened and money changed hands and the media won't talk about it, and it's not fair.
I know you don't represent him, but he's certainly close to Don Jr., or maybe he's not. But Eric Trump apparently tweeted out, "I truly hate disloyal people." Do you have any thoughts on that?
Eric's my boy. He gets a lot of stuff right, okay? And, maybe, if anything, we want to empty the prisons, right?
Right.
But
like that other guy
if
said.
we're going to put, like the other guy who was talking just said, but if we are going to put people in prison, it should probably be the ones who are disloyal, for an example. Like, I don't know, the ones who maybe tell on their friends or whatever.
Do you think that, like the president, flipping maybe should be illegal? That,
well, what I'm trying to say is loyalty is super duper important, legally speaking, as a lawyer. And that insofar as one would, ipso facto, not be totally loyal, especially, I would say, to the president, then perhaps I'm willing to make an exception about that thing I said earlier in regards to prisoning people.
Okay, so empty the prisons unless somebody flips on a RICO case.
I don't know what a RICO is, but probably yes. I would say so.
All right, Stephen Miller.
Now listen.
Okay, John Miller, excuse me. Yes.
Yes, I am not Don Jr., but in a bit of personal news, I will tell you that earlier today, Donnie J did clear a PR in the deadlift, bro. So, pretty big news.
You're a very attentive attorney, John. Thank you so much for the call. All right, you're calling from a 440 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
What up, Michael? This is Adler calling in from Cleveland, Ohio.
Hey, what's going on, man?
Yeah, first off, I just wanted to say today I fell for some fake news that was actually very funny. Online I saw a satire article that said Hobson was going to have a spoken word intro by Jordan Peterson on his next album, and for an hour there I actually thought that was true, and I was flipping out because I couldn't wait to hear that, but sadly that's not going to happen.
Bitches,
that is the match I want to see. But I was wondering your thoughts. Ever since like a few weeks ago, that Catholic news stuff has come out about the Catholic Church abuse.
Right.
I was having some thoughts about that and the QAnon people, or people in general in the United States that start to believe in these conspiracy theories. 'Cause I was listening to the Jacobin podcast, The Dagwit, and I was listening to their interview they had with Matt Christman, and he was talking about how
trying to plug another show on my show, motherfucker. I'm just kidding.
He was talking about how people fall into these conspiracy theories because they have no way.
I'm sorry.
They have no way to talk about power.
All right, will you say that again, because you just totally broke.
He said
up.
people fall into conspiracy theories because they have no way to talk about power.
I think that's totally true. I think Matt Christman is 100% right, and I think that you could see that not only in the United States, but the Middle East is a perfect example of that, when you kill people's political options. And it also, I think, becomes a proxy for people for sometimes for very cynical reasons, and sometimes for just lack of informational reasons, talk about things, point to true things in distorted and inaccurate ways. Yeah. So I think that's true. Yeah.
Like these QAnon people, sadly, their parade got canceled. But when they see things in the news, like the Catholic Church thing, like pedophilia, that's obviously going on by people that have like extreme power in their communities.
Yep.
Like, how do you reach out to these people? Like, I know we're not probably going to reach out to like the extreme QAnon people, but people like Matt Christman said, like Alex Jones people, where he says people like Hillary Clinton are reptiles, and they're obviously not physically reptiles, but by all intents and purposes, their actions are. But
Hillary Clinton is a queen.
I think we've been teasing this interview on the Majority Report that's going to come out next week with Emily Ogden on mesmerism, and I can't remember if we specifically talk about that in that interview. But I don't think it's a coincidence that sort of thing, where it's like, well, I might, like, this guy might be a liar, but he's lying for me. that sort of thing happens when at a time where sort of like even the Constitution was in flux, right? The Constitution didn't explicitly mention slavery, so people were like, what did they mean by not saying that? And the basically the fundamental document that people would appeal to figure out what reality is was completely in flux, and you saw that you couldn't really be a fundamentalist in any way, because it doesn't really work like that. That's not how truth is really stated. And I think we're going through the same thing now, where you have so many people that have tied themselves to some thing that's gotten weaponized by the right wing, whether it's religion or sort of like, gun rights or whatever, and they're seeing that they've been led down some sort of mysterious path, but they're not. The point is, they were never looking for truth to begin with. They're looking for community.
Right. And that's perfectly put.
I don't know how to really do that except to like introduce them in community. But with QAnon people, man, I don't know. I don't know if you can really do much more than just reify what the actual truth is that people should be going toward. And, hopefully that cuts away at it.
I agree with that. And I also think that there's a little bit of a pattern of like, don't always go for the hardest possible targets. Like, I think there's plenty of people out there who are alienated and are obviously in bad conditions because of capitalism and because of our present system, who might not be, politically sophisticated. They might even buy into some conspiracy theories. They might just be disengaged, but they're not like white nationalist nutcases. And I think like, there is this tendency to, it's like, what about the Trump voters? What about the QAnon people? It's like, okay, calm down. Like,
pick the low-hanging fruit first.
Pick the low-hanging fruit first, and then we'll see where we're at. I actually think if we pick the low-hanging fruit, we're at a nice, healthy majority. And I do think that there is 35% of people that are fucking crazy, okay? Some gentleman just tweeted after that South Africa segment that it was no surprise that I support white genocide, okay? Like, that's funny, but that's also, like, illustrative of the fact that there are some people that are stupid, insane, have no ability to process information, and are driven purely by just, unbelievable levels of stupidity and racial paranoia. And, that's just not where we should start. Thanks for the call, man. All right. We're going to do a little bit of a reading now. And then we're going to do a little bit of a reading. Then we're going to do a little bit of a sort of, before we get on vacation all week, we're each going to individually chuck somebody in the gulag. And then we'll take a few more calls and some Discord questions, and then we'll be adieu. Have you guys read this piece? By Sonny Bunch, and that is actually literally his name.
I had to miss it when I really saw the title. I almost clicked for a second. I was like, I just can't let this like live in my brain for the next 48 hours.
You were looking up Garth Brooks' campaign contributions?
Pretty much.
It's like, Garth even gave money to the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee. Yeehaw! Mr. Garth Brooks, do you support the prison strike? That was I like that. I mean, I thought it was funny, but I like the dick move of Leck. We're like, you know what? Let's get a little fucking Cash and Nelson on this show. They're great. And he's just like, you want country music, motherfucker?
Garth is like one of the highest grossing.
He's the Michael Jackson of country music. I was going to do Alan Jackson, but
no, that was Garth Brooks is the Michael Jackson of country music. That was a money take. Okay. The CIA funded a culture war against communism, and it should do so again. By Sonny Bunch in the Washington Post, August 22nd.
Sonny Bunches of Oats is what I like to call it.
Sonny Bunches.
You've been on it today, Matt.
Yes, you have. And Sonny Bunches of we are winning even more than I thought we were when I saw this fucking lunatic column. Earlier this month, we're going to just take a couple graphs of this and kind of do a breakdown. Earlier this month, sorry to bother you, director, Boots Riley tweeted, art for art's sake is never for art's sake. It's for the sake of the status quo. This is why the CIA funded Jackson Pollock. Set aside the vaguely totalitarian suggestion that art must by its nature exist either in support of or opposition to the political establishment. Okay, my first brief editorial is not that it needs to, it's that it does. But
and it's that it's helpful when it's apolitical for the status quo. This is
definitional
shit.
Which is why they funded Jackson Pollock, because his artwork was so abstract that people had a difficult time building political content out of it.
It does look really cool, though. I will say. Today, I'd like to focus on the CIA's involvement in the Cold War's culture war, and think back to a better time when ideas were taken seriously and art was considered transformative, and keep in mind ways in which the agency could help artists struggling to break through overseas today.
Oh my God.
All right, guys. Initial reactions to this very promising piece of writing by Sunny Bunches of Oats.
I mean, this is just like the perfect culmination of the way that the Washington Post has been going for like the past 5 years.
With the elegant and notable and brilliant exception of our friend Elizabeth Brunig. Yes,
of course.
Right.
But I mean, to pine for the days when the U.S. funded shitty art around the world.
You know what that reminds me of? There was a piece several years ago in the New Republic where he's less relevant now, but there was a guy named Rendon. I think it was John Rendon. And he was one of the major PR firms behind doing propaganda for the Bush war on terrorism and invasion of Iraq. And the New Republic wrote like this whole kind of like, it was a fascinating piece, but the editorial line was essentially like, this guy really sucks, and we need to get back to like the serious days when we didn't outsource important work like war propaganda. When the CIA did its own justification for coups and murdering civilians globally, we didn't hand it off to some hack PR firm. Yeah.
Well, one of the reasons I sort of am glad that I started Literary Hangover back in the 1600s is because assessing fiction and literature post-Cold War becomes so fraught with this sort of pollution, right? Like so many of these publications, you needed to be a fucking square like in order to be published in these places.
Exactly.
Because of the CIA like funding the Iowa Writers Workshop or the Paris Review and all this sort of shit. So like that we want to bring that. Should we bring that back? Like,
bring that back.
No, we need to fucking bury that shit forever. Well, not just that, not even bury it. We need to exhume the body, show it off to everybody to see what happened, and then we can maybe move like culturally forward without that sort of poisonous influence.
Are we being totalitarian enough for you, Sonny?
You think that's totalitarian, Sonny Bunches of Oats?
Oh yeah, you wait for totalitarian,
be
buddy.
All soggy.
Yeah, we haven't even gotten to the gulag yet, motherfucker. Those interested in the CIA's covert cultural wars should check out Who Paid the Piper by Francis Stoner Saunders. Check this out. Now,
Stoner Sanders, that's me.
Are these real names that are going on?
Well, no, this is right.
I've actually this is a good piece, actually.
Well, check this out. Yeah. Granted, it's an unrelentingly negative portrayal of the efforts by Michael Joslison, Nicholas Nabokov, and others to funnel money from the CIA into the hands of artists and intellectual journalists that highlighted the Western world's commitment to individual freedom. Once again, like, literally at a time when you're, murdering Patrice Lumumba, you're highlighting your complete commitment to individual freedom. Okay. But if you can set aside the author's bias, you'll discover a fascinatingly Byzantine effort to turn the world to the American way of thinking via the pen rather than munitions and murder. Okay, guys, I'm going to get back to you, but I just would like to say a historical assessment of CIA behavior from Asia, Latin America, and Africa and the Cold War, I would say let's be diplomatic here and say the pen was supplementing the munitions and murder.
Whenever Nixon talks about Ivy Leaguers on his tapes, the common sort of interpretation has been that sort of anti-Semitism or the sort of anti-WASP or whatever. I read that as he's upset with the type of people who basically have a relationship, official or not, with intelligence in America. And the next line actually says that. What does it say? The CIA at its founding was largely run by Ivy Leaguers, would-be highbrows and intellectual. That a sentence after, he says the effort to turn the world to the American way of thinking. So the American way of thinking basically decided by Ivy Leaguers from the mid-century.
Exactly.
Oh, I mean, yeah. Well, I mean, I can't believe this claim. I have to wonder when I'm reading this whether or not the CIA is sitting there shaking their head, saying we should not be outsourcing our jobs to intolerable acts. Like,
I think Sonny Bunches of Oats is the kind of stan that I don't even think gets contracts.
No,
like, he's the kind of guy. He's like, no, I'll just do it for free. I'll literally propagandize on behalf of one of the most ruthless, dangerous intelligence organizations whose very existence is frankly a contradiction to transparent democracy. I don't know why he's talking like Jordan Peterson, but it just feels right.
Well, because
I'll just do that.
Jordan Peterson is the same sort of anti-communist that, I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised if he gets funding from certain quasi-governmental
I would not be
organizations.
surprised. And they're both the same kind of credulous shitheads that could write a column literally saying we should restart intelligence propaganda programs in the same column that's like, because, democracy is under threat.
Basically says subsidize guys like me.
Right. I would totally like more funding. Why does that black guy get to make movies? What about me? The CIA at its funding, was largely funded by the Ivy Leaguers, would-be highbrows and intellectuals. It makes sense that they'd have been attracted to the ideas of men like Melvin Latsky, the consummate Cold Warrior, who pushed for the founding of a magazine designed to bridge the gap between the West and the rest. According to a post-war memo by Latsky submitted to the U.S. Army, journalists like Giramana would serve as, quote, a demonstration that behind the official representation of democracy, American democracy, lies a great and progressive culture with a richness of achievement in the arts, literature, philosophy, and all aspects of culture which unite the free traditions of Europe and America. All right, this goes on and is as credulous and insane as you could imagine. And again, I love that he is literally basing a lot of this information off of a book that is actually a historical critique of this self-evidently dangerous program. But now this is where it gets really juicy, and where I think your guys' careerist instincts, or maybe just honey bunches of off every med conceivable, really start to kick in. Which brings me back to Riley and Sorry to Bother You. The director in recent weeks has complained of not being able to obtain foreign distribution for his entertaining new picture. This is understandable. Indies often have trouble, but unfortunate. The movie's message would resonate in China, the world's second largest market. After all, Sorry to Bother You's worry-free corporation, which feeds and houses workers in factories to increase productivity, seems a dead ringer for Foxconn, the quote-unquote forbidden city where Chinese workers manufacture Apple devices. The movie's message might appeal to people in a nation where poets and artists and activists have been imprisoned for bucking the leadership's dictates. Now, that's all true. 100%. China is a very repressive country. And as you just said, bunches of oats, they have abusive sweatshop conditions, which make all of the consumer electronic goods of U.S.-based corporations. You dumb motherfucker. Take it away, guys.
It's also no doubt that Boots Riley movie, which is incredible, by the way, is been getting such positive reviews in the United States because it speaks a lot to the fucking conditions here, right? I mean, it's not
right. By the way, not only is that true, but also literally right down to Scott Walker is working his ass off to get a Foxconn in Wisconsin.
Yeah, I didn't leave Sorry to Bother You thinking that'll show China.
Yeah, I was just like,
actually,
worry free. That's that goddamn rapper, he just made a goddamn polemic against China, say? The CIA ought to fund this. What do you think of that, Chairman Shea?
Actually, let's take it one step further and say, Sorry to Bother You might have universal appeal across the world that is dominated by capitalism and the form of wage labor exploitation.
It's almost like a movie that illustrates the universal abuses of the capitalist class and the definitionally exploited state of labor in a capitalist economy. It's almost like that movie does that.
This is obviously, it's just this guy's such a hack, and this is such an absolute embarrassment. But this is something. The history of the CIA involvement in the arts movement is something that's even embarrassing to like fairly centrist liberals.
Right.
They look at this as like a dark period in our history, right? And it's incredible today that folks think that this is anything. And I don't know if this is necessarily something that only like the more like wild, fringy, right? Because to imagine for a second that like, I mean, who knows what kind of art forms that this guy's talking about, recreating. But to actually think that that's going to have something that's like is going to repel.
Well, here it is. Here's what he's literally
please tell me,
proposing.
actually. I didn't want to deal with it.
I don't know how
but
much longer we can do this. If the CIA were looking to have some fun in the cultural space, I love now we're literally merging the worst. Now he's using like the speak of a brand planner at some agency in Lower Manhattan now. If the CIA was looking for a way to have some fun in the cultural space, they could do worse than distribute Riley's opus. Commission a top shelf translation for subtitles. Bang out Samizdat DVDs. I don't know what that is. And upload the movie to his...
Samizdat basically like they're distributed unofficially.
Oh, okay. Got you. Samizdat DVDs and upload the movie to as many filing, sharing, and streaming services as possible. How better to demonstrate the unfettered freedom American artists have in America to criticize the system. So now we're flipping. Now it's, that'll show China you get to make a movie that criticizes capitalism in America, to which everybody would say, yes, I'm glad that we have more freedom of expression than China. Okay. And this is going to prove what exactly?
Well, I think that point is just obnoxious. But to go back to his,
it might even spur. I'm sorry, just last point. It might even spur Chinese citizens to take action against the Communist Party-backed businesses that dominate commerce in the state. No, it might spur them, as they already are trying to do under the conditions of abuse by their own government and all Western multinationals that operate there, to form an independent labor movement so they aren't ruthlessly exploited, just as they are here at a more rapid rate every day, because most American politicians in the pocket of that same corporate sector want America to have the same utterly destroyed free union movement as they do in a place like China. Witness the Janus decision. You stupid, dumb, ahistorical, economically illiterate, embarrassing motherfucker.
What a way to show American values than to have state industry get involved in the production of cultural products.
Yeah, no, that's real American values.
Free market.
Yeah.
Well, actually, in a way, it is very American, right? To just have the federal government float money to a bunch of ignorant, fat sons of bitches who make way too much fucking money and all the working people absolutely fucking hate, than to just fund obnoxious CIA cultural projects.
But it was funny. But I will say this. If the CIA would like to take him up on this idea, I'm totally game for more and more people watching Sorry to Bother You. So I hope that the mid-level brains in the intelligence apparatus are reading the mid-level brains of the Washington Post editorial page. All right, guys, let's do a quick round-robin gulag.
Oh, I was just going to gulag Sonny.
All right, Sonny gets gulagged by Matt.
I feel like
David, do you have anybody on your mind, or are you going to go Sonny too?
I just want to capture his name real quick. I want to
Sunny Bunch.
No, I want to throw into gulag this tablet author for their hit job on Julia Salazar.
Okay, speak on it.
Apparently,
Julia Salazar, when she was young, had different politics than she has now, which is pretty explosive.
Armin Rosen.
Okay,
and there's a hit job that came out about her and just sort of started. I mean, pretty. Intensely digging through her own personal documents and family history in an attempt to discredit her by showing that Julia Salazar is someone who wants to work to represent working people, has a little bit of a complicated family background. Much like most working class people in the United States, I will just say it's like, anyone who's obsessed with the kind of like family pedigree or anything like that, it's an absolutely kind of disgusting upper middle class to the upper class in general.
It's a creepy
attitude,
article.
and it's very creepy. I mean, it's absolute hack job, and it's fairly upsetting. And I have to say that I've been pleased by seeing the reaction of most folks have just been to sort of shrug it off and say like, how wild is this, and to attack somebody's like personal like identity identity and religious faith or religious, someone who claims an identity and religious background. I don't know. It's just something that it's really despicable for me. So that's my nomination for this.
I agree, and I think mostly I was kind of somewhat planning on ignoring it because I do think that it's the kind of thing where it's just like, you know, kind of something that can die in the dark. It's a pretty irrelevant trash. Like, most people won't read it. It certainly has nothing to do with the concerns of the housing and inequality
Anybody
crisis.
who's not like a tablet reader who likes
Yeah.
to like trace bloodlines is going to be confused when they read it. Like it is very strange.
And the other big takeaway is, yes, she, and by the way, one of the big reveals is like she had a far right position on Israel, and then when she had some experience how the Palestinians were treated, her politics changed, which is, first of all, exceedingly normal.
Yeah.
And has actually influenced the activism of many Jewish justice activists. And two, does, I have to say, give the big explosive revelation that people's politics actually change in
And
life.
an encouraging one at that,
Yeah.
too.
But that is shocking. I mean, the idea that you would not have the exact same politics over a series of years is profoundly controversial.
Oh, Lord, when they go through
Yeah.
my early teen years, it won't be good.
Hey, baby, put down that pipe and get my pipe up.
I want to put who's going in the gulag? It's actually a good question. I'm throwing fucking Steve Pinker in the gulag because he is the boutique brand justifier of a whole bunch of mediocrities and shitlords, and I really hope that people will listen to the longer deconstruction of him with Marek Sullivan in the patron section. All right, a couple more calls and a few Discord questions. You're calling from a 651 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, sort of. Hello.
I'm sorry if this doesn't work. My
No, this is good. Now we can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay, good. I was afraid it wasn't working. Hi, this is Mariana from St. Paul.
Hey,
Minneapolis
Mariana.
area.
Hey, what's going on? What's on your mind?
Hi. I haven't called in for a while, so I hope I don't sound too disorganized.
No,
But-
you're good. Go ahead.
Yeah, on the kind of, I guess, issue of, well, this is kind of based off something you noted with the discussion on prison strikes earlier. Kind of how the chicken processing is, you know, there's horrible work conditions in those sorts of areas and industries and such.
Yep.
Yeah, I just wanted to, I guess, briefly touch upon that, and it's not probably the best I could have, like,
But just
studied up
it's
on what I
okay.
read.
Just go ahead. Say what you're thinking. You're good. Go ahead. But definitely say the point.
Okay, sorry.
No problem.
So yeah, I basically last year did a project on animal agriculture and how that disproportionately affects people of color and obviously prisoners, which are kind of intertwined.
Yep.
And how I don't think it's really talked about enough. We do talk a lot about farming in that regard and kind of manual mechanical labor, and how animal agriculture and processing is kind of like a synthesis of those two things. The actual rates of injury in that kind of processing industry are some of the highest that we have out of any industry, probably higher than even things that are typically considered very dangerous, like construction and lumber processing.
Yep.
So when we talk about, I'm personally kind of an animal rights activist, when we talk about stuff like that, I just think it's also important to kind of consider the human cost.
Definitely.
Even when people aren't involved in these mechanical disasters, stuff like getting limbs cut, arms cut, is kind of Upton Sinclair sort of a nightmare. There's a lot of repetitive stress injury that comes with a lot of these jobs that people who are primarily people of color, people who got out of prison, still in prison, are subject to, and even when they get out of prison, these are long-term effects where it can really hurt your muscles. It's obviously hard on your mind. And
Let me say, so Mariana, this is really good, and I'm going to actually plan on, and in the Discord, if you have resources, you can message me recommendations. I'm going to plan some content around this stuff, because this is the sort of realm that I think we need to do a little bit more content around. So thank you so much for the information on the call, and message me if you have resource ideas, and we're going to do some content around this, and it's good to hear from you. Thank you. You're calling from an 832 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, 832.
Hi, this is Raquel from Houston.
Hey, Raquel, what's going on? Got a Texas caller for Griscom.
Yeah.
Do you like Garth Brooks?
I was. He's all right.
Oh shit.
He's not Texan.
I was calling
matter.
about the Jason Hickel. I was calling about the Jason Hickel Twitter thread.
Yeah.
And how he framed it morally, and I think that's the only way that I'm starting to get through to people.
Okay.
When it comes to talking about inequality and the things that Trump is doing, is you just have to frame it in like a moral frame. You have to frame it morally, because that's the only way that they see. Because everybody always wants to turn to logic and reason, right? And they look at numbers.
Not us.
But really,
fuck logic
right.
and reason.
But we have to frame it morally, like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is doing.
Definitely.
And that's when people start listening, and that's when you can start getting through to class consciousness.
I agree 100%. And I think not only are you 100% right, I think that's one of the reasons why all of that nerdery is so toxic and so pernicious in the culture. And again, all kidding aside, this is a very empirically based show. And actual objective realities matter in the context of framing and forwarding what are fundamental arguments about ethics and power. That's what all this stuff comes down to. Politics is about power, right, and then whether or not you have the integrity and the ethics to realize that it should be broadly distributed so that everybody can have a dignified, realized life to the extent of who they are. Those are the dividing lines. And those idiots, whether they are, dark web nonsense on YouTube, or even Steve Pinker suggesting that politics and moral questions are the equivalent of, an engineering problem. It's not only that it's wrong, it's that it privileges a discourse that is always going to evade what are fundamentally moral and power questions. I think you're 100% right. 100%.
Think about the forces, like when Steven Pinker talks about that things are great, and we're seeing less and less people in poverty. What social and political forces is he encouraging and bolstering?
Right.
And what forces is he pushing against? He's pushing against movements for human dignity. He's pushing against people who are fighting for minimum wage increases. He's pushing against people who are demanding more from the society by literally supporting the opposite side. And it's like, you look at it from that framework too, you could start seeing things a lot more clearly. It's like, what forces are benefiting from this kind of perspective?
Yes.
And it's clear who he and why his funding, who he's just, yeah.
Yeah, I was having an argument on Facebook about raising the minimum wage, and they kept saying, well, these are the tricks that they're going to use to, get rid of it or to argue against it. And I'm like, okay, well, but why are you arguing with them instead of against something that you know is wrong? Right.
Yep. I agree. I think there's a lot of stuff. I love, the story of the Gordian knot and Alexander the Great. You guys know that story?
No.
Tell it.
So it's prophesied. It was apparently it was like some Greek, it was some type of prophecy or something that whoever cut the Gordian knot would be a great conqueror, right? And nobody could do it because it was so complicated. And of course, Alexander.
Whoever sorted it out, untied it, right?
Untied it.
Yeah.
Whoever untied it.
Yeah.
Precisely, right. That's important. Whoever untied it would be a great conqueror. And of course, Alexander the Great had a big, hard on for being a conqueror. And he was a young guy, and he was, today he would probably be in the podcast space. And he was out, and he had to get rid of the Gordian knot to, prove that he was the person who would fulfill this prophecy. And he went to where the knot was, and all the other people, they took measurements, they developed strategies, all the stuff that failed using logic and reason. And he just like took his sword out and cut the thing apart, and the knot unraveled. And then he was like, all right, I took care of that. And then he went on to win. And that's something, there's a lot that people need to learn from in that anecdote.
Sounds about right for someone who went on to become a mass murderer and is the criminal for the burning of Persepolis.
Well, he's a fucking criminal, no doubt, but we still have something to learn there.
I'm standing up for my Persian comrades who don't get enough love with all these fucking Greek narcissism that we have in this society.
This motherfucker always standing for Iran love. Jesus Christ. Like David, the whole point of David's public persona is to stand for Persian Twitter. There is going to be like, he's right, and everyone give the Greek credit, and we did it.
Look, there's a lot of really rough stuff that comes through the guise of pro-Greek. And look, the movie 300 is racist. Mic drop.
I didn't see 300, but I believe you. But can you not do pedantry and nerdery in the whole point?
Sorry, I didn't mean to derail that.
Yeah, okay. And of course, to the pantheon of TMBS, we would add Lula, Mandela, and Alexander the Great, because he knew how to handle the fucking Persians. That's a great observation. You got anything else?
We need to start covering Beto more. He's doing really good down here in Houston.
Okay.
I'm in Houston, which is like it's a democratic city, but out towards the suburbs, it's very, very red.
And he's really good, actually, like a good candidate, right? Like he isn't just like, obviously anybody's better than Ted Cruz, but Beto is actually decent, right?
Yeah, I went to a rally of his out in Katy, which is a suburb of Houston, and we had like 1,800 people. There was only 1,000 in the seating, and they had 800 people in the spillover room. So he's gaining some traction down here, and he's got really great politics. He just went viral with that answer to the question about the NFL players kneeling. So hopefully,
tell everybody that.
I will. I'm sharing it.
But what did he do? I'm saying even for people watching now.
He lent into he said it's American to.
He said it's American
to protest.
Awesome.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes, he said it's the epitome of American patriotism to kneel in protest.
Awesome. All right, we'll cover him more. Thanks a million for the call. Call back soon, please. That was I could not agree more with that call. You're calling from a 266, a Skype. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
Michael, is that me?
Yeah.
Hello?
Hey, what's up?
Hello?
You're on, man.
Oh, hey, long time to speak. This is also known as Conan Zavok Barbarian. Yeah. I have two things to mention. First of all, as a resource, not only entertainment, but also sort of cultural history and maybe inspiration, I would recommend to anyone the Firesign Theater. I don't know if that's before you guys' time too much, but they are a famous satirical group.
Cool, okay. What's the second thing, real quick?
Okay, real quick. Well, first I'll mention their magnum opus is "Don't Crush That Dwarf, Hand Me the Pliers." The second thing is, in terms of what you just were reflecting about the importance of power and keeping that in mind as the touchstone of political activity. Sometimes I think it's good to reflect back on like before-after scenarios, whether it's pre-New Deal, post-New Deal, or say Britain, pre-NHS, post-NHS, or going back further over a generation, the transition from feudalism to capitalism, which I hesitate to mention since sometimes your arch nemesis Richard Wolff talks about that sort of thing. But that's it.
Thanks a million for the call. You're fucking right, I do. All right, you're calling from a 478 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
Michael, this is Jeff from Georgia.
Jeff from Georgia. What's up, buddy? Gotta be kind of quick.
Hey, man, I just want to say real quick.
Yeah.
I'll be quick.
Yeah.
Two things, real fast. First thing, if I was a politically commissioned officer, I would be at least a brigadier general.
Okay.
Second thing, I want to accelerate white genocide on this call. Unironically, I'm totally serious. Listen, I was doing a bit of research for my own pontifications, and I found myself a letter signed by a lot of luminaries. People might know Howard Zinn, the historian, Cornel West, of course, friends of the show, Derek Bell, others, from 1999 on the anniversary of Harper's Ferry. It's not too long, not going to read the whole thing. It basically calls for the abolition of whiteness as a social construct in order to abolish white supremacy. And I got to tell you, Michael, I never heard it put to me quite like that before, but that really spoke to me as a white man. And I'm dead serious about that. This idea that the populations of different human, quote-unquote, races constitute human biodiversity, it falls apart in the face of this project. I want everyone to think about that a little bit. Think about maybe not even considering whiteness to even be a real thing no more, y'all. That's how we got to get through this, I think.
Race is not a real thing. Anti-essentialism always. Read Adolph Reed. Whiteness is a particularly poisonous fiction.
Read
Thanks
Ellison, the Invisible Man, if you want a fiction take on that.
And definitely read Ralph Ellison, Invisible Man, no doubt. All right, you're calling from a 408 area code with the final call of the night. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
Hi, Michael. It's Josh from Silicon Valley.
Hey, what's going on, Josh?
What's up? First-time caller. Love the show.
Thanks,
I
man.
just had an idea. I'm going to talk about QAnon. Okay. Cody Johnson did a great piece on some more news. Well-researched as usual. Loved it.
Yep.
Yes. How does, of course, it's obviously someone cooked that up. I love conspiracy theories. It's a hugely popular topic on the internet. So just thinking, like, whoever came up with that idea was just really brilliant and just hacked the minds of the people who on that side who just feed into that. And I had a small sliver of hope that it was someone with actually, like, on our side, and there would, or it'd be some elaborate hoax, and they would just get clowned in a really epic way. I don't think that's really what's going on.
I don't think so.
I'm not a creative person, but I know you have a lot of creative people who listen to the show, so I just want to throw a seed out there. If anyone
don't go all the
really
way.
creative,
The seed has been planted. Don't go all the way.
Well,
Don't
yeah,
finish the thought. The seed has been planted.
Sam always talks
Yeah.
about his idea of doing like all the same sort of the conspiratorial tone of narration and music cues over like Obama doesn't want to push healthcare as far as it should go to the left, and
Right.
that's
No, it was that he had an opportunity for a public option, but he compromised by negotiating with pharma behind the scenes. Dun dun dun, right? And then you would just turn it into basically just a polemic for single payer. No, I think there's a lot of very fun cultural mischief that can happen in that whole space. Thanks a million for the call, man. Please call in again soon. I appreciate it. Matt, read a few Discord questions, please, from our comrades.
you got
in the
one.
Discord.
I'm pulling it up now, but you had one on the new Prime Minister of Pakistan.
I'm very skeptical of Imran Khan. I think Imran Khan has some discourse which he's adopted recently criticizing inequality and neoliberalism, which is persuasive. But I think, first of all, and this isn't an indictment of him, but I don't think anybody gets elected prime minister in Pakistan without at least a pretty workable relationship with the army and the ISI, who are the fundamental problems there. And I also think that while obviously his critique of drones and U.S. presence and killing of civilians are correct, I think he's also made some frank appeals at times to very right-wing religious politics, which I'm an opponent of, period, across the board, whether they be Christian, Jewish, Muslim, Buddhist, or Hindu. So maybe he was the best of bad options, but I'm skeptical, but willing to learn more and do more content on.
Sorry, I'm looking for the thread, and I keep losing it here. I don't know which.
I think maybe the new questions come in and lose. We only could. Sorry, everybody. We're only going to do 2 or 3 more. I apologize. I'm going to have an AMA soon and a call soon, and we're only taking a week off. God damn it! You're not even missing any content. What am I apologizing for?
This is such a huge message board.
No, it's massive. We've got a lot of activity on there. If you haven't joined Discord yet, you don't know what you're missing. It's an amazing community. Join up, new patrons.
Sorry, I can just find live discussion here.
Let me see. I might be
It
able.
should be on. It should be on TMBS Live.
The actual questions?
Yeah. Because they're and I think people say at the mod. Sorry, David Slavic is not available this evening, and there's a certain level of professionalism that is missing.
It's under TMBS questions.
TMBS questions. Excuse me, my bad. That was my lack of professionalism.
All right, let's see here. We got.
And while you're there, why don't you guys say hi to the fucking people? They miss you. Go ahead.
This is from Tricera Tiger. Is it all a worthwhile historical parallel to compare contemporary efforts at land reform in South Africa with Zapata's efforts at land reform in Mexico in the 1910s?
I don't know enough about it, but that's interesting. I'll look into it.
And we had a question: is TMBS considering koozies?
Yes. Sure. What we're definitely considering, like things like shirts and hoodies are like beginning to be in the works, as well as, and Griscom, you and I, we're getting our heads tight on this, live shows.
Yeah.
Because I'm excited to do the Count the Dings Woke Bros show with Waz in October, but I am quite jealous of them getting live shows and not us. I think it's definitely time to get TMBS on the road.
People need to appreciate our strong physique.
That's exactly right. This is the non-pussy left. Any more questions? That was it. All right, guys. We thank all of you. Obviously, if you're just here for the, new to the YouTube channel, subscribe. There's already a ton of content up for you to watch and share. Great way to get new people on the show and continue to expand our growing universe. Become a patron today. It's essential, helps us sustain and grow. Patreon.com/TMBS. Thank you to the Brain Trust. Thank you to Matt. Thank you to David. Thank you to David. Thank you to all patrons. Thank you to all watchers. Thanks to everybody. Sunday, New Illicit History. Next Sunday, New Illicit History. There's a brand new Woke Bros that are up. And then, before you know it, first week of September, we're back live.